Okay, I think we're live. I forgot to click to go on live. All right, today we got a couple of things to do, mainly two, maybe three, depending on how things go. One of them was we're going to use a rub and buff, actually the silver one. This stuff, it's depending on where you buy it, it's actually cheaper to buy the pair than it is to buy an individual one. So, in general, I just get most of the stuff from Amazon because I know the shipping time frame on that. But you can get it at any kind of like Hobby Lobby, Michaels, all those type of places. You sometimes can even get it at Walmart. But it's about depending on where and in what format you buy it. It's about $4 or $5 per tube. But these two were $10, I think. So it's kind of expensive, except that they're not big. You know, this is 1.5 fluid ounces. So they're not big, except you don't use much at all. You use a tiny little bit of it. So I haven't used any of these particular tubes. These are brand new. And I printed our flash suppressor for the DL44 Han Solo blaster thing. And I used our adhesion promoter on it, so I sprayed that, sprayed some primer on it, sanded a little bit. Actually, I sanded it before I did the adhesion promoter. I did do a little bit of sanding, mainly on this piece, whatever that piece might be called. Mainly on that. Here, there's a lot of, I don't know if you can see them or not. Let's see if we can focus on, I don't know. Maybe we zoomed in. You can kind of see them. There's a lot of little ridges. Some of the primer, it was really muggy and hot when I printed this, and the paint didn't go on very well, mainly because of the mugginess, and the paint was a little bit old, or the primer rather was a little bit old, and so it filled in a little bit of these lines here. These are tiny little, not knurling, but ridges across here, and so some of them lost some of their detail. We may redo this one depending on if we want to or not. I think the main point here is, can we make this look sort of like metal? One way you can do that is with this type of material. There are other colors too. There are two gold colors, a silver, and then there's other brands that are similar products. This is the one that seems to work best for me. I don't want this to look gold on the actual blaster. This is a silver looking piece, or aluminum looking. The way it was printed, now it's stuck on here right now, it's just sticky tacked on there, but it's on there pretty good because I'm going to have to mess with it. It was printed standing up. This part, zoom back out, it's relatively thin, so it's a little bit flexible. Actually, it's quite a bit flexible. So you do have to be a little bit careful that we don't break that and forget that, oh yeah, this is just plastic. Particularly, this is just maybe 2 or 3 late walls thick of plastic. It's not very many at all. So we printed it up last night. Did a little bit of sanding here, although I think there's if this part was actually being made, it would probably be a lathe part. So some lines across here might actually look like machining lines. So if we don't get rid of all of these, that might actually be okay. Because it would sort of make it look like it was machined on a lathe. Now these would have been created some other way, maybe on a shaper or something like that. I don't know. But I don't think it's necessarily a cast part, although now with that thick primer I put on there, it does have a little bit of a cast texture to it, so we'll see. So how you use this is pretty simple. You literally rub it on, and then the shinier you want it, you buff it out with, I just got a little rag over here. So I don't know if we'll spend time to do the entire thing. We'll do some of it, see how it goes. And I gotta get the tube open. I don't think we got it all the way open. Maybe we did because there's a little silver on there. All right, let's get our rag ready. See if we can, and like I said, you don't need much at all, a tiny little bit. There we go. Let's start on the And you don't have to seal this, like paint clear coat on it or anything like that. You can just let it sit for a decent amount of time, maybe a week even, to get it to, I don't want to call it cure, but something like similar to cure. We might even have to go back and add a little bit of weathering to it. And I'm noticing that that initial spot where I put, it's right here probably, where I initially put down the material is a little bit more silver than the other parts. So you might want to almost get it off of your rag, dab it several different places versus what I did and put it all at once, because that part is a little bit more silver than the other parts now. But this is basically literally what you do. You put it on there, and the more you buff it, the shinier it becomes. So there are actually, it's wax, like carnauba wax, and super fine metallic particles embedded in that wax. And so the more that you go in and buff, the shinier it will actually get. Now, I think I'm probably not gonna like this section is almost too clean, but you can see there's a decent amount of shine on that. Over here, we're probably gonna have a hard time getting into all of these little grooves. I'm gonna go ahead and put some down on there, and we'll probably have to get a little bit more. All right, let's get a little more, but not a lot more, just like that. But this time, let's try and spread it around so that we don't end up with one big shiny spot. You can see how it picks up the higher spots. Like these are little recesses in there. I'll probably have to get like a Q-tip or something, which I don't have right over here. I'd have to find one to get down into those spots. But that's actually handy for what we're trying to do, because we're trying to recreate something that was used, not like brand new. And so typically all of these recesses would fill up with grime and dirt and all that sort of thing. We might even go in and try to create a little bit of, I'll have to look at see if the actual prop had this on it or not, but some kind of heat discoloration on this suppressor where it turned maybe a blue color. I don't know if they added that or not. I didn't pay enough attention. But you do this as much as you want to until you're satisfied. I actually kind of like how this part in here is a little bit dark still, but I'm gonna make it a little less dark because it is pretty extreme in there. But I like how it's kind of grimy in there. That makes it look a little bit real. So this is a relatively simple way, not terribly expensive. Like this would last us many of these type things with the amount you actually use. You don't use much at all. I'll have to take it off to get on that piece. But anyway, I might off camera sit and work on it a little more, and maybe even see if we can get it a little more polished. We didn't do inside there, but this isn't an actual gun. It's a sci-fi gun, so who knows what kind of soot or whatever might occur inside one of these things. I don't know. But right now it's kind of a flat black inside there. I might try to get a little bit in there just to have not totally black in there. Something like that. I like, oh, you can't see that. Kind of like that. We might do a little more. But, and we got a little bit more here. Like this is a little more. We might have to try and dull down some of those. But really, when you're making something that you want to look used, any kind of little variety in it lends a little bit of, newness, not newness, but realness to it, because if it's been used, then it's not perfect anymore. So I kind of like that. But that's a pretty easy way, and you know, it looks reasonably like a piece of metal. It started out as a I don't have any. Oh, this material. It was this color. So it actually looked really cool when I printed it, and then sprayed the black primer on it, and then sanded that a little, because it looked kind of like this almost copper piece, because the black primer sanded through, and you're left with some of this sticking out, and it actually looked really cool. But it's supposed to be silver, so we used our silver leaf rub and buff. Ended up with something like this, and it you can see a little bit. Yeah, you can see them there. You can see the layer lines poking through a little bit, but I actually think that's okay for a part like this. You can't pick them up on here because it's got this texture on it. You can almost see them in here, and then maybe you can see them here. But like I say, I think, you know, if I were making this part for real, I would probably make it on a lathe, and there would be a good chance that there would be some machining marks on there, so it looks kind of real. It has a, I don't know what material color that looks like. It's almost aluminum, but not quite. It's a little bit too dark for aluminum. The other thing that you can affect, I sprayed this with a black paint underneath here, so a different color paint underneath here would give it a slightly different tint when we went to do the rub and buff part. Typically when you're trying to make something look shiny, a gloss black underneath it will help that illusion when it's not actually chrome or metal or whatever. Something like the chrome paint at Walmart is typically too thick. You know, when you spray it on, it's typically too thick to do something that actually looks chrome. This particular gun doesn't have anything on it that would be chrome, like actual shiny chrome. There are some I don't think I could find it right now. Maybe I'll find something to print and show you some ways to make things look chrome. There's one relatively simple way to do it with a pen, actually. And then there's some more complex materials, paints, that are much heavier content of metal particles, and they can actually look like all types of metals. But they're kind of expensive. You have to use an airbrush. There's a lot of prep that goes in with using those. But there is one paint pen that does a really good job of making something small look chrome. You wouldn't want to like paint an entire thing, like a giant thing, with it. But if I can find mine, which I think is over in that area over there somewhere, then I'll print something just so we can try it out and see how it works. When you're trying to do something reflective, though, you really have to have a nice surface to begin with. You know, if you have all these bumps and everything, it's going to kind of mess up the illusion of it being shiny. But I like this. I like the way this turned out. I'll do some more in here probably to get a little bit more in those grooves. I didn't do any back there. Then we'll look and see if the prop has any kind of heat discoloration. This would probably benefit from a really light black wash, just to bring it down a little bit. It's almost a little too silver right now. All right, so that's one thing. We'll do some more next time. Well, so next time, actually, on Wednesday, we're going to go in and look at resin printing. So I don't know if we'll have much time to bring out one of our pieces or not, but if we do, I'll do some pieces off camera. We still have the handles to work on, the main body. There's a lot of other pieces we have. The main body is kind of this black steel kind of thing, and so we'll work on how to create that. All right, but this is one way you can make some metal. Like I said, it comes in different colors: silver, 2 different gold colors, and then other brands that have all sorts of colors associated with them. But it's basically wax with metal particles embedded in it. In fact, it says wax metallic finish. So we'll let this go for a little while. Probably if I were to handle it too much right now, I'd get some off on me, which is fine. It's not toxic or anything, it's wax. But it does have those metal particles in there. Let's go over to our printer. Get this out of the way. Get that out of the way so we can move the camera. Let's go over here. See if we can get, let's see, that's kind of the right direction. So we installed, in here, we installed the SKR Mini E3 version 1.2 board. So it's not the most recent version of this board. There is a 2 or 2 point something board. This one seems to work great so far, but we haven't plugged in our BLTouch, and we haven't hooked up our touch screen either. So let's try to do one of those things. Let's open this up because we have to do that first either way. I'm trying to debate on should we do the touch screen first or the BLTouch first. Maybe we'll figure that out by the time we get this thing open. I don't even think I put the back screw. Yeah, the back screws, there's a screw back there. I didn't even put it back in there. So I did have one issue. You know, the board that we put in here, the SKR board, is a drop-in replacement. You literally take the old one out, put this one in, and plug everything in almost the same. Remember, there's the fans that have to be backwards plugged in to different spots on the board than they are on the original board. But I couldn't get all of the screws that hold the board to the little plate down here. I couldn't get them all to line up perfectly. So I could only get 2 of the, I think there's 4 that hold it in. I can only get 2 of them in. And the others just were too far off to actually line up. So I think it's fine as it's not going anywhere, but I didn't get them all in there. All right. So there's where we're at. Let's move this over a little bit. We're not plugged in. I don't really want that. There we go. Let's get you down in there. Let's see. I can't really tilt anything. That's the problem. And move that guy out of the way would help. All right. And the bed is as far back as it'll go. All right. So we have, let's do the BLTouch. Let's see how that goes. We have these 2 wires. There's one set, the black and white set, that acts like the end stop. Basically, they're going to replace the end stop. I'm pointing to the Z, the normal clicky switch Z end stop. We're going to go ahead and move that out of the way because we're going to use the BLTouch that's on the printer as the end stop. So you won't be able to see this, but I don't think it's worth moving the camera just to undo these 2 screws. Basically, the end stop over here that's on the axis, I'm moving it out of the way. Because hopefully our BLTouch will take its job. All right, so those wires. Now I do have 2 different wires here, black and white. And there's a feature on this plug that lets it only plug in one way. It should be that it's wired up correctly because we were using this before. These are removable. Like, you can take these wires out and switch them. If you notice, wow, I can even tell that. Let's see. I don't know if you'll be able to see. I'd have to zoom in a lot. But if you take a tiny, I don't have something small enough really right here, but here's something close to small enough. Take a tiny little, even smaller than this, tool of some sort and push down on that silver spot inside there. There's a little barb that when you plug them in, the barb springs out and holds it into this case. Same thing with these type, except these you can usually pull up on the little tab on the black plastic part itself. Anyway, you push that barb down and then you pull the wire out and switch them around. these were working before when we used the BLTouch, so I assume they still work now in the same orientation. I want to plug that guy in. Let's see. All right, and then this can go one of two ways. It can go this way with the yellow on top, or it can go this way with the red on top. Now, you'll see a lot of wire. In fact, I looked for a lot of the wiring diagrams. Let's see if I can find one. Here we go. Like this. That shows. Now, there is a one that's labeled probe over here. You can plug the Z in-stop wires into that probe, but it works a little bit differently. So I'm actually going to plug the BLTouch in-stop version wires over here. These have, like, there's ground, power, and the signal wire. I don't have those exact same colors over here. Oops. But I have similar colors. So I don't have brown, but I have red and blue and yellow. So none of those really match up with the set of wires that are normally shown in these pictures. But there's only, assuming that they're not in the wrong order, there's only one way they can, you know, only two ways they can go. And if I see, there's servo, and I'm going to try with the, I don't know, let's try, since I do have yellow and they had yellow as the signal wire, let's try put yellow as the signal wire, which is on this side over here, into the one labeled servos down in there. So, like that. All right, so it's plugged in, and to get it to work, I need to change the firmware and say that, hey, there's a BLTouch, why don't you use that now? Now, before, when we modified the firmware, we went into Arduino IDE and wrote some code, or we didn't really write code, we commented and uncommented code, and that process still works, but it's not Arduino anymore. For this is running in Marlin 2.0 or 2 point something. I assume it's 2.0. Actually, this is the firmware that came on the board, so I assume it's that. I assume if we turn it on, it would tell us what the firmware was. But I haven't set all that up yet. I haven't set up this other environment that we can go code in. But this board is supposed to support just putting in a SD card with your new firmware, and it will recognize that there's a new firmware on that SD card and install it. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. I went to, where did we go? Here? Yes, I think this was it. So here, this is GitHub, and Big Tree Tech is the company that made this board, and they have posted 3 months ago apparently some different firmware. So firmware.bin, I think that's the one that just ships on the board when you get it. Firmware BLTouch.bin is almost what we want, but I think I want firmware BLTouch for Z homing, because I want to use the BLTouch as a Z home device. So it's going to replace that Z in-stop, not just be a probe, but actually be a probe and the in-stop. So I'm going to download this firmware. In fact, I've already downloaded it. Now this is for the 512K version, which I think is what they're shipping now. So this refers to the amount of RAM on the board. So on the board there are memory chips. Earlier boards had 256K. Remember, in fact, when we did the old board that was in here, we had to comment out some things, and we had to be careful about the size of the firmware we were uploading to it because there was limited amount of space. I think all of the boards that they're shipping now have basically double the amount of RAM that we were working with before. And that's what this is. So we were working with 256K before. So I'm going to get this one, put it onto, you don't have to do any of the fancy like imaging the thing. You just copy it onto a SD card. Now I have taken the SD card that was originally in here. I've taken that one and stored it away because in case I ever need to go back to whatever was there. I guess I could just download it over here too, but I did, just in case, kept that one separate and have a different SD card that I'm going to copy onto. So I downloaded this. You can't leave it this file name, so when the printer boots up, if it's looking for firmware, it's looking for something called firmware.bin, and then it renames it to another file so to know that it's installed it or whatever. It names it to firmware.cur, I think. Anyway, so I need to rename my file to firmware.bin. So here's the SD card that I'm using. This is actually the SD card that came with the printer. So let's just copy. All right, so there, literally just cut and paste or drag it onto the folder or whatever. The firmware BLTouch for Z homing, but we need to rename that to just firmware. .bin. It needs to have that .bin file on the end of it. Okay, now let's eject this. These SD cards, you know, a lot of times you just pull thumb drives out or whatever, but I've had too many times where just pulling the SD cards out have corrupted them, that I'm usually way more careful about actually ejecting them than I used to be. So let's go over here, put this guy in. Now, getting it, I don't like the tiny little SD cards because they're hard to line up. All right, we do need to plug it in because I wasn't plugged in before. All right, what we're expecting or looking for is, let's see if we can get over there to it. If we get higher and higher, we can get there, I think. All right, so when we turn it on, it should recognize that, hey, there's a firmware.bin file on here. I'm going to flash that to the board. And so this screen should basically just stay blue for, I don't know, 30 seconds or so while that process is happening, and then boot up. If that doesn't happen, then we've done something wrong, and I don't know. We'll see. All right. So it came on. And nothing yet. I was actually expecting this to be lit up, but I don't know. I'll let it run for a while because there's no lights on my board either. So let's let it sit for a while, you know, a couple of seconds. But it's not acting right. Let me find our previous card just in case. There it is. In case we have to go back to that. And it could be maybe our BLTouch, because also our BLTouch didn't activate at all. But if it's installing new firmware, then I wouldn't expect the BLTouch to activate. But I would have expected our power indicator light to come on. I mean, we obviously have power. This fan is running. So we do have power going to the thing. This fan is also running. And I've never actually put firmware on one of this. Is the first time I've even used one of these boards. Is when you saw me install it last week. So I don't know exactly how long to expect to wait for this process to happen. But I'm thinking it should be a minute or less. I'm a little bit reluctant to just turn it off and back on. Just because if it is in the process of updating firmware, I don't want it to be stuck halfway through that process. But at the same time, I think it should have done something by now. And the firmware I put onto this SD card is from the company that built the board, so I would expect it to be, you know, correct. Unless this board is not one of the 512 type boards, it can only do the 256. Some of the early boards, the memory in there was only 256K, and if I try to put something that's larger than that, it can't all fit. So I don't know if it would give me any kind of errors or not about that. All right, I'm going to think that it would have been able to install firmware by now. There is probably a risk that if I turn this off, it is stuck halfway between an install and not install, and maybe it's not going to accept the firmware that was on there before. But I don't know. Let's find out what happens. Let me look at some of these other firmware options over here. All right, let's turn it off. Let's try without the BLTouch plugged in, you know, in case we had crossed some of the power wires there. Let's try that. I would have expected a more dramatic problem though. Well, you know, that might be it. Now I've got power over here, blue screen over here, so it could be that we just plugged this in backwards, even though the yellow wire we did match up, but none of our colors match the other situations. So it could be that this was our problem, and we had basically shorted. Hopefully we didn't short something permanently bad. But now we've got a screen. I don't know if it is the version of firmware that we put on here or not, but that was more like what I expected to happen. So let's shut it down, plug this in the other way, and see if we get something better happening. All right, so we had put yellow over here. Let's put yellow on this side, and let's make sure we're in the servos. I mean, yeah, that's the servos one. Let's put it this way. See what happens this time. All right, so the same thing before. So I'm wondering if this guy is wired totally backwards from what it should be, or we have some other problem. Let's check. Our wires look to be fine. There are no other, it's really dark down in there, so I can't really see much going on. This spot is, this is the TFT, so that is where we're gonna plug in the screen. This one is NeoPixel, so there are, NeoPixels are little LEDs that you can individually address or talk to, like just this LED and this whole string of LEDs, or a ring, or whatever shape you get them in. So this board supports those directly on the board, so you can plug in your NeoPixel array and have all sorts of dancing LED lights or whatever. I don't have any of those. Maybe we can find some, but I don't have any. Yeah, that it should be that plug. So now our possibilities are, this order is just totally wrong. which is going to be tough to figure out what the order should be, except that typically red is going to be your 5-volt power, and I know that the 5-volt power should be the middle plug here. So we could make that assumption. I don't know if we can see on the BLTouch itself. Let me see if I can find a diagram of the BLTouch, and maybe we can make some sense of it. Like if there's something that's labeled. All right, here's what I'm looking at right now, is this over here. So this is the normal configuration, brown, red, yellow. That's what we were expecting to get, but we got another set of colors. But it looks like brown is the outermost, which on ours is actually blue, which is in the middle of our little plug here. So, and then the red is in the center there. Our center wire is red, but red needs to end up in the center. So I think yellow, the third one. All right, so I think based on this picture, what we need to do is we need to take and switch red and blue. Definitely gonna have to zoom in to see that. So I think we need to switch red and blue, which are the power and ground. So I think we actually hooked up the BLTouch's power backwards, so reverse bias than what it should be. So let's see. Now I do need to find something small enough to get these out of here. So maybe we will get to see how that works. I just got to find something tiny enough to get in there and actually pull these little pins up to, or tabs. They're not pins. I'm looking through a little toolbox. This one wasn't big enough. No. All right. Let's see. Let me think what might be small enough to get in there. I have a knife that we might make work. All right. Even it's pretty small and it's hard to see. So normally you push in on these to send them that way, the wires, and then you can usually get under there. And so now I've got I had the blade underneath that one. It's kind of difficult because you got to do all these things at once. Because once you get under there, you got to pull the wire out. So I may have to stop talking for a while and actually get this to work without stabbing myself or cutting the wire or something like that. All right. All right, so there's the red one. Let's see if we can get the blue one out. All right, there's the blue one. All right, so according to our picture, the brown wire is our blue, and it needs to be on the outside. So it needs to be the red one in the center, which is weird because that's the way they're done here, but for some reason they had twisted them around. All right, so to put them back in is simple. You just literally insert them again and make sure that they click in that little spot. I don't know if you can see let me zoom in. Right there on top is the little tab, little barb that clicks into here, and then this little tab on the housing holds it in place. Let's see if I can, there we go. All right, so now we should plug in this way. So we were using the blue as what they have as brown, red, or yeah, that's red. Red as red and yellow as yellow. So basically we have all the colors except but it was working before. That's the weird thing. Because we've used this BLTouch before without doing that. I don't know. Let's plug it in and see. I don't know. It's working now. So, and it's doing the blue screen here, flashing red light, which makes me think that we're communicating off the SD card. And there's Marlin. The BLTouch is on. It went off the screen. It's going through its wake up procedure to check itself, which it decided it's doing well. So I'm not really sure why they were flipped. Maybe the original board plug had those a little bit different than this board. I don't know. I don't know if that's a normal thing you have to do to get the BLTouch to work or not, but it's what we had to do to get it to work. So let's try now. Let's actually send this up a little bit, and let's zoom. There we go. Let's just try to home Z and see if the BLTouch acts as a Z home. So I'm going to over here to I think it's in motion now. Move act. Oh, let's home Z. All right, so let's home another one. Home X. So X is working. Y working, but Z is not. Oh, no, there it goes. Just took a while. All right, so I want to home it really high up here. Okay. Okay. You have to home X and Y before it'll home Z, because it is possible that this probe would be off of the bed. That's why it wouldn't let me home Z before I did X and Y. All right, so let's do an auto home and see if it'll do everything. Looks like it's going to be fine. So I'm not sure why this board needed a different arrangement for the BLTouch wires, and the other board, I guess the other board doesn't care for some reason that it was powered backwards, but it worked fine. We never had trouble with the BLTouch plugging it in to the other board. So I'm not sure the difference there, and I'm not sure if you would have to do that every time or not. Or maybe this BLTouch was sold. It was sold from Creality. It was their packaged product that came with a little bracket that mounts on the Ender 3, and so maybe that original Creality board has a different plus and minus on their voltage for the BLTouch, and that's why they had flipped those wires around, because it was sold from them. Never actually ran into that before. Maybe I've just never noticed it before because I haven't tried the same BLTouch on two different boards like that. But that's, you know, sometimes stuff like that happens. And so it's good to have an idea of what to expect and then what might be the problem. So change one thing at a time. So here we plugged in the BLTouch. We didn't go ahead, and it would have been really easy. Let's go ahead and plug this thing in too while we're got it open. But just do one thing at a time. Then when it wasn't, you know, we gave it a minute or two to try and see if it was just taking a while to upload the firmware. Nothing happened. We turned it off, unplugged the power and signal wires from the BLTouch, and it worked. Plug them back in the other way, it didn't work. And so then you start tracing down and troubleshooting what's actually going on, but do it one step at a time. All right, so we have, I think, enough time to see if this guy's going to work. So let's shut it down. I don't think we need to change any firmware for this screen to work. I think the firmware will be fine. Now, I am not going to go, this screen is made to mount in exactly the same spot that this one was, which will be nice if we can get that to work. But first, we're just going to plug it in and see if it works before we go mount everything and then assume it will work. So we're going to unplug. Let's get you back down in there a little closer. We're going to unplug the old LCD, but leave it in place. And then I've got to find where these plugs are on here. Oh, I don't see a place. So I want to plug these two wires in, and I don't see, I mean, I see the one, but I don't see the other one. So this screen can operate in two modes. One that basically emulates what the old screen was doing. Let's make this stop auto zooming in and out. One, what the old screen, basically it simulates the old screen's layout and everything with the blocky text and everything. And another mode where it's a touch screen with buttons on it. But in order to use the simulated mode, I have to plug these wires in. And I only see room to plug one of them in, unless I'm just missing the other spot and I just don't see it. Maybe this one only needs one, but typically there are two. They plug in over here. Actually, there's spots for three of these, but maybe it'll work with just one. The old LCD only used one, so maybe it works with just one. We'll try one. And plug that into the place where the old one was. There we go. And then this is a series. Now this one's split. So there's one that's the reset button and four that are all the communication for the screen. They are going to plug into the one called TFT. So it's right there. It's written on the board TFT. And they split these out. And some boards, the reset pin goes on the, well, where's something I can show you with? On one end, like over on this side. And on other boards, the reset pin goes on the other end of the set of five. There's 5 plugs down here, 4 plus 1 here. It won't actually hurt anything if we plug it in backwards. So I'm going to assume that this board uses the reset pin on the pin closest to me in the TFT slot. I'm going to plug it in there and the other 4 right beside it. All right. So now when we, gotta plug it back in. All right, turn it on and let's see. All right, so it did come on. I don't know if that's what we're expecting though, because that doesn't look quite right. So that could be that our, well, first it could be that we're in the simulated mode. So to switch, you hold the button down and we can go to, see there's Marlin mode and touch mode. I want to go to touch mode. So that doesn't look, so you can see the touch screen in there, but there's definitely, well, we've got this screen on here. That's not really changing anything. So let's reset. No, there's something else. Let us unplug this guy because it's not. All right, so now we get nothing. Reset, we got nothing. Let's try. Nothing. Shouldn't be. Wonder if we have a problem with our screen. It's very strange. It's like there's an overlay on the screen. It also thinks there's no printer attached. I don't think we would get any of the correct type of signal if we had these backwards. Like I don't. The reset button is working, by the way, so that we have reset in the right spot because it's resetting. But there's a weird overlay, so let's try. Make sure we've got good connection down there. I'm just making sure that these are correct. All right, so what happens if we... That's really strange. It's sending everything over this cable. Well, now, this actually has its own processor on here, so a lot of what happens on here is just happening on this board. Should still reset. Yeah, there's some connection problems. Look at all these lines across here. We may have a bad board that we have to replace. We have to check on that because there's definitely, it's a little bit loose, but I don't think that's giving us the actual problem that I'm seeing. Here's the connector for the screen. No, I don't see anything there. All right. Let us set this. Well, I don't want to just set it down. I want to try this the other way. I could have also missed a plug. There's no actual indicator that you've plugged these in correctly. All right, so that doesn't do anything. Let's go back to where we were. So I assume, so the all right, so I thought reset was working, but I think we weren't actually doing that right. Let's go to reset on the far end, which would put these guys over here and reset over there. All right, so reset here. That looks right, but it still says no printer attached. I do only have the one cable here. Let's just let it boot up on its own. All right. Still no printer. But everything works over here, but you know, oh, now the BLTouch is acting a little bit weird, and it's moving. We're in 1 millimeter. Okay. So I think it is working, but I don't know. Oh, all right. So it maybe just takes a while to make the actual connection between the two. Let's see if the simulation mode works. So you hold down the button for 3 seconds, and then we can go to Marlin mode. Oh, well, so I don't know which one of these to actually plug it in. Let's go back to the number 2 spot. I don't know which one it was plugged in over there. We still don't have any. Oh, all right. So number 3 is the one apparently that it needs to be plugged into when there's only one wire. I guess maybe I could have looked back here and seen, but now see we have a simulated version of what was on our original screen. And the knob works like it did before. You click on it and you've got your original stuff. Hold it down for 3 seconds. You can go back to touchscreen mode. And now I've got a touch screen. So I think it does work, but for our setup, the reset pin, the single one, goes on the top side. The other 4 go beside it. And the ribbon cable goes to expansion port 3. Not 1 or 2, but 3. And looks like we're good. Now I do have, I have a SD card slot here, a USB slot. We can change the firmware. This thing has its own set of firmware, so we can make our own buttons. It's kind of washed out, isn't it? I don't know if I can make it not. There you can kind of see what's going on with it. If I tilt it just right. So we can set up our own buttons or whatever. So I think I will now. We ran out of time today, but I'll go ahead and mount this in the location of the old one. Put it over here. It had its own knob, which I don't know where it went, but I kind of like that one. The one that came with this one is just a plastic knob. So if this one will fit, this is a nice, like, machined metal knob. I'll use it on there if it'll fit. But this should be we take these 2 screws out, unmount this, put ours in there, and now we should have touchscreen. All right. I think that is enough stuff for today, enough troubles that we've gotten into. But we fixed it all. We didn't. I'm about to get into more trouble here with this thing. All right, set it there. So we got it all back working. We'll look at resin printing. We can get in all kinds of troubles with resin printing. It's very messy, but it's really cool on the advantages that you have. You have much higher detail possibilities, although we did get some really good prints off of our Ender 3. But maybe the bigger deal is that you can get that level of detail, but across the entire build plate at one time, so you don't add another 3 hours to print a highly detailed object every time you want to print another one. You can put 5 or 6 of those same objects or a variety of objects on the build plate at one time, and it takes the same amount of time to print those 5 or 6 as it did to print one of them. So that's one of the big advantages for the resin printing. So we'll look at that next time. Maybe we'll get some prints out of it. It is a slowish process because your layers are can be so thin. Like typically the thick layers on a resin printer are the thinnest layers you can print on a FDM style printer, kind of in that range, and then they go thinner and thinner from there. So we'll try that next time and see how that goes. All right, see you on Wednesday, and let me know if we're getting close to the end of our course sequence here. So if there's some things that we haven't talked about that you're interested in, let me know, and I will try to incorporate those in I think there's maybe 8 or so meetings left, something like that. And I'll try to incorporate some of those things if there's something particular that you're interested in that we haven't really talked on, or something that you want to talk more about that we just touched on a little bit. I'll see you on Wednesday.